one of the concepts that social psychologists have come up with in this realm is this idea of display rules. Okay. It's kind of like an emotional dress code. It's just like you wouldn't wear a swimsuit to a funeral, right? That there's kind of a dress code.
Speak for yourself.
Well, yeah, I know. You probably, I don't know, we're in California, who knows? But that's kind of like a dress code rule. That's culture, unspoken rule, that happens. Same kind of thing happens with emotions as well. And they call these display rules. So when is it appropriate to display which emotions in which scenarios? How intensely you display these emotions, or even the emotion that you display in any given situation. There's kind of these strategies that happen at the cultural level that can modify or completely change emotions too. So you have like intensification. So how intensely are you socialized to express emotions and get any given situation? So there's intensification versus de-intensification. Some emotions in some cultures are more suppressed than they are in others. Then there's neutralization too. Sometimes you're encouraged to just shut off emotion in certain situations. And then the masking, kind of replacing one emotion for another, for whether it's for the sake of social harmony or status or anything like that. Okay, so there's these display rules kind of come up again and again in culture. So for example, like in some cultures, if you're angry, they encourage you to smile instead and kind of just cover up that anger, right? Or tone down your excitement to appear modest in some cultures as well. That happens quite a bit. They've actually reproduced this in the lab as well. There's this really kind of interesting study where they showed Americans and Japanese a series of emotionally charged videos, okay? And they did it under two different circumstances. Well, first they watched them just alone, and they had like a hidden camera or something like that, and they could observe the people watching these videos. And then they had an observer sit in there where it's very clear that somebody was watching them, right? So the Americans, when you showed them these emotionally charged videos, they would react with pretty big emotions, or they would just kind of express themselves in both situations. Whether somebody was watching them or not, they're like, oh yeah, that's funny, or that's sad, or that's infuriating, whatever it is. What was interesting though, the Japanese participants, when they thought they were alone, they expressed a lot of emotion watching these videos. But when somebody was watching them, they tried to tamp it all the way down.
Interesting.
Okay, right? And so this kind of gets to display rules, kind of this big category of display rules anyway, of kind of like East-West collectivist versus individual cultures, right? Whereas usually in East Asian cultures, you have more of an emphasis on the group and the collective and social harmony. And so emotions, almost any emotion, whether it's good or bad, is kind of seen as a little bit dangerous to the social balance.
Yeah.
Whereas, in the United States, it's more...
It's all about like it's freedom, baby.
Yeah. Express yourself, right?
I'm angry, goddammit.
The individual takes a much more center stage in a lot of Western cultures, especially in the United States.
Yeah.
So that's just one instance of display rules. And again, they've reproduced that in the lab, which I thought was kind of interesting. But this happens all the time. You'll see it everywhere.
I'm just thinking about, because the culture I know best outside of the U.S. is Brazil.
Yeah.
And it's funny, Brazilians have this thing where Brazilians are very extroverted.
Yeah.
And it's a very gregarious culture. People are talking, they're very loud, they're very excitable. But it's funny, I lived down there for a long time before I realized that actually if you're not extroverted, if you're not talking a lot and you're not excited, like people think something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
They think you're like sad or depressed or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, even if you're tired, or if you're like not in the mood, or if you're like worried about like thinking about something, they take it very personally if you're not being talkative.
Yeah.
And it's super fascinating.
That jives with the research as well. That's what they find, is that if you're not what they call, if you're a nonconformist, an emotional nonconformist in your society, you're usually perceived as immature or unstable, rude, inappropriate, when you don't reflect back these display rules of your given society. And so like when you travel to another country, this can come up a lot, and I'm sure you've had a ton of instances of this too. But if you ever go to another country, you usually violate some of these display rules without even knowing it.
Yeah.
That's a powerful social cue for
an incentive.
conformity.
Yeah. For sure.
So that's just kind of to lay out the beginning of it. There are these display rules that we all have in all cultures. They're taught to us from a very young age. and they shape not only the way we express emotions, but the emotions that we feel as well.